The Special Anti-Robbery Squad is undergoing massive reforms at the order of Vice President Yemi Oshibajo.
Now, the vice president gave the order at the time he was acting president, following several complaints by Nigerians of brutality and abuse perpetrated by officials of SARS. Now, part of the first reforms carried out by the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, was to change the name from SARS to FSARS, or what you may call the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad.
The IGP also ordered operatives of FSARS to wear police uniforms with full identification and conduct their operations in strict adherence to the rule of law, due regard to international human rights law and the constitutionally guaranteed rights of suspects. But some civil society and advocacy groups are not satisfied with just the reforms. They want a total overhaul of SARS. They say the reforms would not achieve the required results. Of course, we still have Managing Editor, Gloom Television, here in the studios with us, Ayodele Adio. And of course, retired Police Commissioner Emmanuel Ojukwu joins us now from our Abuja studio. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Well, let me start with you.
Good morning.
Yes, let me start with you in Abuja. Well, advocacy groups, quite a number of people have said, look, these reforms will not change anything. Changing from SARS to federal SARS, and people have wondered how a mere change of name would be effective in terms of reforms that Nigerians are calling for. Do you agree?
Well, we all agree that the reforms are ongoing and that the IG operations, mode of operations of the SARS is an indication that the police is responsive to the yearnings and desires of Nigerians. It's an ongoing exercise. As days go by, more things will be done to make sure the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, that is what it is, operates in line with rule of law and the code of conduct expected of police officers. So let's just watch as days go by. A lot more things will come that Nigerians will be happy about.
Okay, I'm still going to stay with you, Emmanuel, because you've commended the police in responding to the yearning of Nigerians. It took so long, it took so much cries, it took so much detention, it took so much abuse of the SARS and the call from Nigerians, and then an order from the then acting president, for this to take place. Well, so when you talk about the issue of responding to the yearning of Nigerians, I wonder how that response is.
Yeah, that's a response is a well thought out process to a particular desire or demand by somebody or a group of persons. SARS didn't come today. They've been operating for many years. And the police that formed Special Anti-Robbery Squad had a mission, had a purpose for forming such a group. So when there's a call by Nigerians that SARS should be scrapped and all that, the police will have to look inwards, to take some time, look inwards, and then look at how best to get that outfit to serve the needs of Nigerians. Mind you, in every police location, in every police criminal investigation department, you have the anti-robbery squad. You also have it at the federal level. But this was a special anti-robbery squad. It was created to solve a special problem. Right now in this country, we have so many light arms and small weapons in the hands of non-state actors. You have a lot of robberies in the south, southeast, and kidnapping. You have insurgency in the northeast. You also have a lot of killings of Nigerians in the Middle Belt. That means that a lot of blood is being shed on the soils of Nigeria. And the police, being the chief operator or chief manager of internal security must put his act in order. So the mere fact that somebody called that you should end this particular organization does not mean that the IG will just run over himself and scrap it. He must think it over. So what you have is an exercise to make the SARS useful to the police and to Nigerians. What the police is working on is a win-win exercise, and I'm sure everybody will be happy at the end of the day.
All right, stay with us. We're going to be back with you. Let's talk to our guest here in the studio. Well, at the very base of the call for the reforms is the attitude of police officers who operate in that unit, the way that they treat Nigerians and suspects, and all of that. And you wonder, these reforms that have been put in place, redeployment of some officers, and then federal, some units not operating in units where they used to operate, now going to operate under some other units, and all of that, psychological and medical tests, conducted for officers as well. Do these reforms match what Nigerians are asking for? Would they, have any effect on the attitude of the officers?
I think you just placed your finger right on the button. When you use the word attitude, the chief problem with the Nigerian police is the attitude, the philosophy, if you would like, of the Nigerian police, their view of Nigeria security generally, and the way they should carry out their task. If you recall how the Nigeria police was actually set up, it will give you an insight to the kind of attitude that, that the Nigeria police have had over the years. The Nigeria police was set up by colonialists who wanted to repress local agitation, who wanted to protect the regime at the time. And so the first sets of police were slaves, from Sierra Leone or Liberia, was it? And they were hired to do just that. And even when they moved to become the Nigerian police in the 1930s, up until that mentality has really not left the Nigerian police generally. So you have today a Nigerian police that sees its primary objective, as regime security, and not providing a service to the Nigerian people. And except we can move that paradigm, from the fact that they wear those uniforms not to keep the leaders in office safe, but to keep the Nigerian people safe, we will not really see much change. Because what we need to begin to see is that the police see what they do as a service, as a calling, not just a service, as even a calling to humanity, to ensure that people can walk the streets of Nigeria safe, without fear. People can ensure that their properties are safe. Until we get to that point, every other thing we'll be doing will be mere cosmetic. We need to change the mentality, the psychology of the Nigerian police. And this is not going to be done by some tests in the hospital.
And sorry, also
there's some tests in the hospital.
Yes, and
it's
also
going to be done.
Also knowing that this is not the first time these reforms.
Yes.
Many of the reforms, we have seen them before.
Exactly.
Even last December or so, many of them, if you do your research, you'll find them there.
Yes, that's the point we're making. That all of these reforms will be simply, at best, cosmetic, if there is no paradigm shift. And for you to shift the paradigm, for a new culture, for an acculturization process in the Nigerian police, is a lot of hard work. You need a strong and decisive leadership that can communicate a bold vision and can pull everyone along. So you have to get the training right. You have to get the leadership right. You have to get the structure right. A situation where there's it seems like there's a bit of divorce or so much of a distance from the high command in Abuja to what you have in the local commands around, also creates that huge gap. And that's why you see that when a directive is given from the Inspector General of Police, for instance, to remove all checkpoints on the highway, 48 hours later, you're seeing checkpoints everywhere. When there's a directive that you don't have a right to search the phones of people, 24 hours later, at the streets of Ojuelegba, you are having police officers searching the phones of people. So there seems to be some sort of a disconnect. Maybe it's because of the distance, between the command in Abuja and the policing units across the country.
It takes time. It takes time for orders to trickle down.
For people to assimilate the idea of a police as a service unit. Yeah. I mean, there was a proposition also by the Human Rights Commission, of course, also in the recommendations for the SARS, that you have a human rights desk across police stations in the country. It still does not change anything, even if you have a human rights desk in every single police station. And I tell you why. There's Servicom. There was a time that there was Servicom in every single ministry. Did that improve efficiency or effectiveness? It did not. Because all you simply did was to put a desk, a representative there.
The attitude was the same.
The attitude was the same. I mean, so until you change the attitude, of the men in uniform, which takes a lot of work, years of training and commitment.
All right. Let me bring in back Emmanuel in here from our Abuja studio. Apart from the administrative instruction or order of saying that your name has been changed from SARS to FSARS, and then when you're going on operation, you have to wear uniforms with name tags. You have to respect the international human rights standards. You have to respect the Constitution and all of that. Apart from those administrative instructions here and there, which are the first things, what are the really critical content of this reform? What dimension is it taking that is going to be different from what SARS used to be?
Okay, my friend over there mentioned attitude. The police has, over the years, embarked on a change in the attitudes of police officers in the conduct of their operations to bring them in sync with the demands of international best practices, with the Code of Conduct, Nigerian Police Code of Conduct, the rule of law generally, and respect for the human rights as enshrined in our Constitution. Also, there have been internal checks and balances. We have these units. I know one of the officers was a key participant in this SARS stuff. The Public Complaints Rapid Response Unit was set up also by the police as a way of checking inappropriate conduct on the part of policemen and to bring in such officers to book. The police that I know does not condone indiscipline, does not hide miscreants or those who engage in what they ought not to be engaged in. Anybody who did something bad was brought out and dealt with in line with the regulations. The police does not tolerate that. So the reforms there will be ongoing. Part of this thing will be to train the officers on what you expect them to do. In management, if you don't train somebody, you don't blame him. Several panels have been set up by government to look into police reforms. Part of it is that the police training institutions are poor, they are bad, officers there are not properly motivated. Where else will you train these SARS if not in police institutions? So the ball falls back in the court of the public, the government, and people of Nigeria to fund your police appropriately so they can train the men who are working for you, for your safety and for your security. It falls back on all of us to provide a wherewithal to train the police. And by the way, we must have an understanding, there is no police boy. Every person you find in the police is an adult, a man or woman. He came from a background, he was trained in a family, he was brought up within a community, he was trained in a school. How good is the community? What are our values in this country? How good are they? How good are our schools that train these policemen, people before they become police? Now, when they come into the police, how good is the facility to make them proper policemen? We need to have a reform generally of Nigerians' attitude to the police. A reform of our police, how we treat them. When you see the police as devils, those who will go to hell, you make a mistake, you have an attitude. And they too, as bona fide citizens, have a right to protect their own self-esteem. It may create problems, but policemen are being trained to absorb some of these shocks, not to fall in conflict with the law. So there has to be both sides of the divide have to take care of themselves. Nigeria is undergoing reform. The police will also undergo reform. But let the wherewithal for the police to be trained be provided.
All right, Ayo, sometimes when you come in contact with some police officers, we're not saying they aren't, you have fantastic police officers who are very well behaved. There are others as well who are on the other side of the divide. Sometimes when you come across these ones who are on the other side of the divide, you wonder what really is the process of recruiting individuals like this into the force.
First of all, you have to admit, when you talk about recruitment, that standards are falling everywhere. And it's not just the Nigeria Police, it's the Nigeria Teaching Council. The standards have basically fallen everywhere. So the quality of people that you have filling positions in public service have been lowered greatly. Take, for instance, an investigative journalist, Fisayo Soyombo, 2 months ago, drove from Abuja to Lagos, and Lagos back to Abuja with a car that did not have papers, no documents, nothing. He documented that he went through close to 80 checkpoints and bribed his way through with 48,000 naira, right? And he had video clips, audio recordings of the police people who he engaged with, and published it in what was a beautiful piece at the time. So you ask yourself the question, how did somebody drive all the way from Abuja up onto Lagos with what actually could be called a stolen vehicle, because he had no papers, he had nothing, he did it intentionally to test. How could somebody have moved from Lagos to Abuja and bribed his way through with 48,000 naira? Now, this is because the people he met on the checkpoint could not comprehend the larger picture of their role in a society. You know, when they stood there at a checkpoint in maybe Jebu-Ode, for instance, they thought about themselves, they thought about their families, they thought about their future. If I was going to be able to retire with a house, if my kids could go to a pretty good school.
And every single thousand adds up.
And everything, and so they took that kind of decision there and then. So, you know, like the former police officer in Abuja rightfully said, you cannot reform an institution without looking at the underlying factors that have created the problems that you're trying to fix. And one of the things that have created those problems is the poor welfare of the Nigeria Police, is the lack of equipment, the lack of technology, the lack of investments in intelligence, and then we just expect them to perform magic. If you ask me, at every point in a society's life, it has to decide what it subsidizes. And for me, rather than subsidizing petrol and reach a few people in the country, we should start thinking of using the 5 trillion that we've invested in subsidy in the last 10 years and see if that 5 trillion had gone into security, would we have saved the thousands of lives that have been lost in this 10-year period? I mean, imagine just a 1 trillion naira investment in the Nigeria Police over the last 10 years. The magnificent of the remarkable transformation that you would have seen. If a police officer can be confident in his future, can be confident that his child can go to the best school, then nobody will be able to drive a car without papers from Abuja to Lagos. It will never happen.
All right.
And so we have to look at that factor and fix that underlying issue where the welfare of the police is made paramount. And except that happens, we'll be blinking in the dark, believe me.
All right, let me bring back Emmanuel in here. You said earlier, you established earlier that the police responded to the yearnings of Nigerians. You are very familiar with the workings, the inner workings of the police. Now, can you give us an idea? What kind of reports did you hear about SARS that made you respond to the yearning of Nigerians? Can you just give us a picture?
Well, I'm a critical observer of what happens in Nigeria Police, having served there for 32 years. And I've been following the trends in the social media in particular, the hashtag #EndSARS. I believe Nigerians were not properly informed on the need to have the SARS in the first place. And some do not have an understanding that it still lies with the police to prevent crimes in this country, to maintain law and order in this country, and to arrest criminals and stop them from unleashing mayhem on Nigerians. So by the time this calls were being made, it became viral in the social media. I know the police are also literate. They're also internet savvy. They also have their handle, and I've been following all that. They began to look at what are these complaints. And officers went about town to find out how genuine are these complaints. And I do know a number of officers who misbehaved in the course of performing special anti-robbery squad operations were brought to book. A good number were dismissed. Some are already facing criminal charges. That's a response to the yearnings of Nigerians. The police is always looking into complaints. They don't hide anything under the carpet. So what you have found is just a tip of the iceberg of what is coming out of SARS. The bottom line is Nigeria police will keep will remain responsive to the yearnings of Nigerians. It's a service organization. And the more people cry, the organization has to look into why they're crying and make amends that are appropriate and germane to the situation. We cannot just end SARS like that. SARS, they are doing wonderful work, because I have it on good record that if not for SARS, what we have in Maiduguri would have been worse than what we have today. So I think they are doing a good job in many respects. They've recovered so many arms, they've arrested so many robbers, they've also been able to counter so many robbery operations. We'll give them kudos for that. But I do know that there are misconduct here and there. That's why in every law you put sanctions, because you know somebody may go out of his way to do what he ought not to do, or fail to do what he ought to do. And so you apply sanctions, and the police are up and doing in that respect. All these are areas of responses of Nigeria police to SARS issues.
All right, Ayo, is there a sense in which you think that the police force itself is in a way complicit to some extent in the way that many of the officers, through their frustrations on Nigerians? We remember not too long ago there were protests, somewhere up in the north, where very clearly we saw police officers, protesting non-payment of their allowances. And this couldn't have come from, you and I, but, somewhere within the police authorities. So is there a sense in which you think they are also complicit in what we're saying?
I mean, first of all, the police officers live in the same country you and I live in. They live in the same neighborhood with us, and they are part of a system, that has been described, by a former British Prime Minister as fantastically corrupt.
David Cameron.
David Cameron. So you have, they are not insulated from that system. They walk out of their house every morning, and let me now say this, a terrible accommodation, I must say, very terrible accommodation. And they walk out of that very terrible accommodation every morning. And they see kids of people who they know made money through other means, driving the most luxurious cars, going to the best schools abroad, and securing positions that they know that their kids will never have, in the conditions that have been provided for them. And then we now expect that by some, laying of hands, they are supposed to be insulated from the real Nigerian issues. That's not going to happen, right? And so we should stop looking at the cases in isolation. There's a real systemic problem in Nigeria, a real structural problem in Nigeria. And except we fix the structures and fix the system, we are always going to have institutions that are going to be weak, corrupt, ineffective, at the end of the day. The Nigeria police looks very obvious because they are saddled with the responsibility of protecting you and I. They are the people we run to when something goes wrong. And so that's why it's brazenly obvious that a lot needs to be done there. But that can be said of almost every other institution in the country. And that's why I keep arguing that a fundamental aspect of the reforms, and not just for the police, for the country entirely, is a strong judicial reform where we can have a very strong and viral judiciary, that will deal with cases with speed, within, outside the constraints of time, and ensure that justice is delivered to the people. There's a New York Times story early this year that was released, and papers were gathered, from somewhere in Iraq, where ISIL leaders were dislodged, and they found papers, that ISIL leaders used, to dispense justice to the people. And the story captured certain frightening events on how they were able to win local support in the communities that they led in, and that it was not just by force. It was because the ISIL leaders dispensed justice swiftly. And so a market woman can report that her 10 naira is being owed by somebody, and immediately they approach the courts, that the ISIL people put. They got justice almost immediately at the time. It didn't matter who the person in the society was. And so they were able to. So justice in a society extremely important. And except we can get our justice system right, we're just going to keep recycling this problem.
Okay, Emmanuel, let me come to you quickly. How long will this reform take place before we know that SARS has taken a new form, a new look, and new attitude?
Well, the police is a living organization, and one of the qualities we know of living things is that they grow. The police is dynamic. As Nigeria is somebody said Nigeria is a developing country. So every system and institution in Nigeria will be developing. If we say Nigeria is underdeveloped, every system is underdeveloped. And all of us are praying that Nigeria will become a developed country, that every system and institution will be developed. So the reform in SARS, in the police, as a parent body, is ongoing. It will keep going until Nigeria comes to an end, which will never be.
We are talking about the current reform, special reform that is making. Certainly, the point there is we know that every institution will try to reform itself and try to get better. But this special reform now that is ordered by the vice president, by the then acting president, how long is it going to take?
I don't speak for the police, but I know, as I said earlier on, it's an ongoing process.
Okay.
Officers have been trained in many areas. A lot of psychological applications are given to them.
All right.
To bring them in sync with what's expected of them in the course of duty.
All right.
So it will keep going on until we get there.
All right. We have to leave you here now. Emmanuel Ojukwu, former Commissioner of Police, thank you so much for coming on the program. And Ayodele Adio, Managing Editor, Gloom TV.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
For having me.
Right.
Thank you.